Today on CityCast Chicago, 4 former ComEd executives and lobbyists have been found guilty of corruption, including a scheme to bribe former Illinois House Speaker Michael Madigan. WBEZ politics reporter Dave McKinney told us when the trial began in March how Illinois' biggest corruption case in more than a decade affected all of us. It's Wednesday, May 3rd. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is What Chicago's Talking About. Dave started by explaining who the ComEd 4 are.
It's the former CEO of ComEd, Anne Pramaggiore. In business circles in Chicago, she was one of the rising stars, one of the most prominent, if not the most prominent female business executive in Chicago while she was at ComEd and later at Exelon. There's an underling of hers named John Hooker. He worked at ComEd for decades, became a consultant. There's another guy named Jay Doherty who was a consultant / lobbyist for ComEd. He ran something in Chicago called the City Club of Chicago, and it was a place where business and political insiders would meet. And then finally, the other player in it is this guy named Mike McLean, who is the consummate Springfield insider. He served in the legislature with Madigan back in the 1970s, and then beginning in the early 80s. Became a lobbyist, and one of his earliest clients was ComEd. And for decades, McLean represented ComEd, and McLean was really kind of the consigliere, you could say, for all the Godfather fans out there that to Madigan, where there probably was no closer advisor that Madigan had than Mike McLean.
Michael Madigan was the powerful Illinois House Speaker for nearly 40 years until he resigned in 2021. He was indicted by a federal grand jury in 2022 on racketeering and bribery charges and is expected to go on trial in April of next year. Dave McKinney explained how the ComEd 4's charges basically boiled down to a bribery scheme that would give Madigan supporters high-paying gigs at ComEd in exchange for Madigan pushing legislation beneficial to the utility giant.
And there were some major pieces of legislation that passed between 2011 and 2019 when this scheme was hatched.
What are some of those pieces of legislation, not to get lost in the weeds, but how did those impact people like myself, like you, who are getting these ComEd bills?
Yeah, and I mean, as somebody who spent a lot of time at the State House, like these bills, whenever they would surface, bills that dealt with utility law, they're some of the most densest types of legislation there is. If you were to go into the House or the Senate and ask a rank and file member what was in this 2,500 page ComEd bill, no one would be able to decipher it. Legislators were operating really many of them were operating out of a sense of ignorance. And so they had to kind of trust the legislative staffs, Madigan's office, the legislative leaders to decipher what all this was. If you go back to 2011, there was a bill called the Smart Grid Bill, in which ComEd said it was going to help them ensure greater reliability across their power grids and supposedly stop power outages from happening on a broad scale. They re-outfitted pretty much every home and business in their territory with new, what they called smart readers, electricity readers. But at the same time, they also slipped in language that changed the way that their rates were calculated. That bill in particular, that law, changed the way ComEd was able to set its rates. And the result from that, if you talk to consumer activists like Illinois PIRG is one of them, Illinois AARP is another, they will tell you that act alone cost Illinois ratepayers hundreds of millions of dollars since 2011. And so you can see right there, that is the dollar and cents, the pocketbook piece of this that matters. But the other part of this trial, Jacoby, is that it pulls a curtain back on how Michael Madigan, the longest serving speaker of any house in America, how he operated. Some of the most sensitive issues involving Madigan, political issues, he would communicate through McLean, lobbyist for an entity that is a state-regulated entity. I mean, the guy was legendary for supposedly being so disciplined and careful and smarter than everyone else in Springfield because he wrote many of the laws that exist. And yet, I think, in talking to Illinois Perg's Abe Scar, he kind of likened it to gangster talk. So, again, something out of the movies.
If you don't follow politics or you don't know who some of these players are, how does this affect everyday Chicagoans like me and many of the people listening?
Well, look, if you're a homeowner, and for a lot of renters, apartment dwellers, you get a bill in the mail every month from Commonwealth Edison for your lights, and that's what this is about. There are 3.8 million ComEd customers in Northern Illinois. And what they're paying for their electricity is determined by Springfield, by legislators in Springfield, by state regulators in Springfield. And this trial is basically built around how allegedly a group of former ComEd executives and lobbyists conspired to try to bribe the former Illinois House Speaker into passing legislation that was favorable to Commonwealth Edison, meaning it made their company more profitable and, conceivably cost customers more money.
So will this guilty verdict of the ComEd 4 really change the way politics are done in Illinois?
Anytime that these, high profile political corruption trials, there's always a rush in Springfield to try to get political cover, to pass some sort of ethics plan that, on paper it looks like it does something, but in the end, it may not be it typically is never as tough or as strident as good government groups want. And it always kind of reminds me, very, very early in my journalistic career, one of the things I was assigned to do as a general assignment reporter was to cover this situation in the northwest suburbs in which a husband and a wife were serial bank robbers. And they were just holding up these bank branches over and over and over again, not getting caught. And then finally, the feds did catch up with them. But the long and short of it is, during that coverage of all that, I had an FBI guy tell me one time that bank robbers think that they're always smarter than the last bank robber that got caught. And I would say that same kind of overlay works with politicians. And I don't mean to, with a broad brush, paint every politician in our government, state and local, as corrupt, because they're not. But the ones who are, it's amazing how they can live through a Blagojevich or live through a George Ryan or any of these other cases, Madigan especially, because he lived through it all, and sort of think that they are smarter than the last person who got caught.
Before I let you go, a little bit of news, y'all. Mayor-elect Brandon Johnson is expected to name an interim police superintendent today. Many reports suggest it's Fred Waller, a former chief with over 3 decades of experience. As more and more asylum seekers arrive in Chicago, Mayor Lightfoot has announced the city will turn a shuttered high school in South Shore into a shelter. You can register to attend a community meeting Thursday evening about the plan. And some good news. The Chicago Critics Film Festival is back this Friday at the Music Box Theater in Lakeview. The 6-day festival includes more than 20 screenings. Ticket info in the show notes. As always, we appreciate you for listening. Make sure you're reading along with our daily newsletter, Hey Chicago. You can subscribe now at chicago.citycast.fm. I'm going to talk to you bright and early tomorrow. Peace.